Let's go straight over to my guest for this first hour. He is social and political commentator James Melville. Welcome, James.
Evening, Kevin. You well?
I'm okay, mate. Well, let's get straight into it. Let's talk about, another day, another migration nation scandal. Another milestone for Keir Starmer since he was voted in and became Prime Minister effectively on July the 5th. 20,110 migrants have now crossed the channel since then. Yesterday, 2 boats carrying 122 foreigners arrived on the south coast, taking the total since July the 5th over the 20,000 mark. No wonder Keir Starmer's reset speech this week, James, enshrining his boring 5 missions, his sacred 5 missions, will not include border control because he hasn't got a clue what to do, has he? Don't forget, on the legal front, we had 906,000 came over legally the year before last, not Starmer's fault, to be fair, and 728,000 last year. But on the illegal front, our bill for accommodating and looking after asylum seekers has now soared to £5.4 billion a year, and that's 8.3 million quid a day. The Labour Party, of course, Keir and Calamity Cooper, the Home Secretary, promised A, to solve the migrant crisis. How's that going for them? And B, very importantly, a very solemn pledge this, we will stop using hotels. We'll reduce the number of expensive hotels we're using to save so much money. Guess what? They've substantially increased the number of hotels we're using. We're up to a massive 220 at the moment, hotels being used to house migrants. Nearly 100,000 asylum seekers applied to stay in Britain up until September. 99,790 to be precise. 28% of them were cross-channel small boat illegals. Number of migrants this country have deported, illegal migrants, since 2018, 3% of all arrivals. It's pathetic, isn't it? It's an absolute shambles. And Starmer and Cooper and his useless cabinet have not got a clue what to do.
Yeah, and people are angry about it. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're racist or bigoted. I think most people can see now that it's just not sustainable. And that's actually coming across sort of political debate, not just on one side. And it's important to raise this issue because ultimately one of the reasons we're getting these huge numbers is because migrants will know that they're going to end up in a 4-star hotel. And it's going to cost, £8 billion to the taxpayer, £8 million to the taxpayer a day. So they're incentivized to do that. And yet what we've got to have is a deterrent. And there isn't a deterrent in place. And the numbers, quite frankly, are not sustainable. You get north of 2 million migrants, net migration over a 3-year period. You imagine sort of amplifying that over 30 years. This country just can't cope with those numbers. And so there has to be not just a discussion and sort of brave talk, not just by what Starmer's saying, but Sunak was doing the same thing as well. Yet nothing was achieved. And there's 1 or 2 issues that are really sort of focusing public debate at the moment. This is one of them. And when you've got total costs of migrants and hotels per year versus the money they're taking away under the auspices of a black hole of 22 billion, such as, for instance, the inheritance tax on farmers, combined with the winter fuel allowance disappearing from pensioners as we're going into winter, obviously. You put the sum of the winter fuel allowance together with the sum saved on the inheritance tax, that figure is still less than the sum that's being spent on migrants and hotels. And so understandably, the public think, well, this is not a government that's working in the best interests of people. It's not a sustainable thing. And anyone with any logic and common sense would think that right now. And we actually need to keep banging the drum on this because it's not about xenophobia. This is not about forms of racism. It's about the protection of what works within our infrastructures and our societies in this country. And the numbers that are coming in just quite simply aren't sustainable in 2 aspects, pure numbers, but also the cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, Starmer's alleged solution to this escalating crisis, I mean, from day one, has not been to stop the migrants. It's been to smash the people smuggling gangs, as he keeps saying. As I keep saying, and I'm sure you agree, anybody who knows anything about the migrant crisis will tell you it's no good just saying we're going to smash the people smuggling gangs. That's like saying I'm going to solve the drug problem in this country because I'm going to arrest every single drug dealer. Well, OK, you go and do that, Keir, because tomorrow, guess what? Supply and demand, there will be new drug dealers on the street. So you smash every people smuggling gang out there. Tomorrow, there will be new ones. As long as the migrants are coming, there will be people smuggling gangs. So his entire concept of how to smash the crisis, how to end the crisis, is completely wrong. His own leader, his own commander of the Border Security Command, Martin Hewitt, said just that. You don't have a deterrent. The migrants are going to keep coming. This will not stop them. You need deterrents. He hasn't got any deterrents. Instead, he's going around all these countries. His latest is Iraq, spraying money around. He gave £300,000 to Iraq. He'd say, can you sort of try and stop those migrants, you know, in Kurdistan, you know, coming over to Britain? Here's 300 grand. You know, the people in Iraq, yeah, all right, thanks, mate. Yeah, we'll do our very best. Same for Serbia. He tried to do a deal with Serbia, with also with Kosovo, I think, and also with Macedonia. You know, he's going around spraying money to these countries from whence our migrants tend to originate. But, you know, how do you go about, how would, for example, Iraq go about dissuading its Kurdistanis from leaving Iraq to come to Britain with this 300 grand? This is just performative politics. Nobody believes this is going to work, least of all him. This crisis is getting worse and worse and worse, largely because Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, refused to confront it in the only logical way, and that is to stop the migrants. Either turn the boats around, get the message out to them, you don't get to stay. We turn your boats around, or when you get to Britain, if you don't want to turn the boats around, when you get to Britain, you're detained, you broke our laws, therefore your asylum seeking application fails because you arrived here illegally. Get that message across to people that if they come across the channel illegally, they will not be able to say, end of story, then they'll stop coming.
I completely agree. That is the only solution. I mean, it's, you know, there's a balancing act here, but it's, you know, Britain's always been a welcoming liberal country. But, you know, there's aspects of immigration that have been hugely beneficial to the UK over the years and will continue to do so. But that's a very different argument to what's happening in the Channel, what's happening with the numbers of net migration, what's happening in terms of legal, and also in terms of the hotel costs as well. And therefore, there has to be a deterrent on that. At the moment, there's incentives. So there has to be deterrent, and it is about what happens around the Channel and the borders once they get across. And I completely agree with you, Kevin. But this is what we've got with governments, not just with Starmer, but, you know, previous government as well. It's all about, they want to be seen to be doing the right thing, and by doing the right thing with pure words or throwing some cash around in the wrong direction. It happens in so many different issues. It happens with the NHS, it happens with crumbling schools, it happens in net zero and so on. Yet what's happening is they're punishing their own citizens with things like the winter fuel allowance or inheritance tax on farmers. And meanwhile, they're spaffing money, huge amounts of money, in the wrong direction, not just on this. You know, it's like carbon capture machines or, you know, the net zero spend overseas, which is 11.6 billion. There's loads of this stuff going on. And so people in this country just want our governments to focus on doing legacy policies that aren't just about tinkering with stuff or spending some money elsewhere. Well thought out policies that have an actual impact on our infrastructures, on our public services, on what's happening in the Channel. We need things that people will look at and think, actually, that might work, rather than this nonsense. It's almost like we've got a bunch of politicians that is so above them, they don't have the talent or the courage to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Starmer, to me, is a weak prime minister.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's got a massive, massive mandate. He's got a huge majority. He can do whatever he wants, but sadly, and this is the frustrating thing I find with him, he's doing everything in the wrong area. You know, in terms of what's the obsession with net zero, what's, you know, so tinkering around the edges of what's going on in the channel. You know, the budget was an absolute disaster for small and medium enterprises, and it just undermines growth. You know, he's enthralled to the unions. None of the things that he's doing is actually going to solve any problems. But what he's going to do is create even more problems in a lot of ways, either because he's not focusing on addressing the issue, or he's creating other problems with bad policy. And we're only a few months in. We've got another 4.5 years of this. And this is why the public have already completely turned against Starmer. All these sort of misplaced policies combined with the freebies issue and also combined with his manner. He's really unlikable. I mean,
he'd be more likable if he was in any way competent. But as I say, him and Yvette Cooper, their approach to the migrant crisis, in my view, and I think you agree, is purely performative. Going around saying, I've done a deal with Macedonia, I've done a deal with Kosovo and Serbia, now I've done a deal with Iraq, I've given them money, I'm going to persuade them to stop sending illegal migrants to Britain. I mean, this is nonsense. This is utter nonsense. It's not going to make any difference at all. And it doesn't surprise one, does it, that he's going to make this big reset speech this week, enshrining the 5 Labour sacred missions. They are securing the highest sustained growth in the G7. I think we've probably got about the lowest, actually. So I think he's going to leave that one out because he's completely failed. Making Britain a clean energy superpower. And making us all colder and poorer. The trouble with his green policies are they're incoherent. They don't make any sense. They're expensive, pointless, and under the auspices of crazy Ed Miliband, completely mad. So that doesn't work. He wants to improve the NHS. That won't work. He's already chucked 10 billion quid at it. That's how not to help the NHS. Give it more money, because the money just disappears. Reforming the justice system, well, for him, 2-tier justice, and raising education standards. So all of those things. Where is border control? Does he not understand that border control is important to people? Answer to that question, sadly, James, is no, he doesn't. Yet another set of politicians, just like the Tories before them, who just don't understand how important the migrant crisis is to people. People want it solved, and Starmer hasn't got a clue how to do it. God knows what's going to happen in the months and years to come, but they're talking about, with his policies, we might end up with 80 million people here within just a few years. So it's all a disaster.